Good evening. Happy April 1st. Not an April Fool's, by the way. This is the monthly Living an Authentic Autistic Life in 2022 with Toni Boucher. How are you?
I'm well. Yeah, how about you, JR?
I'm well. And, it was really interesting to get an email yesterday. Toni and I are going to be the panelists for private companies' autism Q&A later this month. And that is going to be so much fun.
Yeah. I loved the questions that they were asking. It really speaks to, this conversation we're going to have right now about like autism awareness and acceptance. For a long time, I think things had gone a different way. And like right now, the questions they asked were very, I think, insightful, and things like, what do you wish your supporters had known that could have helped make things easier for you growing up? So, and just in that line, I got a note from Adrian, our tech support's school this week, reminding everybody to wear red for Autism Acceptance Day today, which I thought was very nice. That they're being mindful of the community and what we are asking in terms of honoring us.
And let's see, you can get to where
Yeah.
flip it around. There we go. The red light bulb.
Yep.
So I wear it with me all the time to remind myself to go red, go for autism acceptance. Speaking of, we have a couple of great guests. Autism Acceptance or Awareness Month, depending on how you like to look at it. Noor from the American Autistic Self Advocacy Network, and Marie from the UK from Neurodiverse Self Advocacy. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And Marie, a special thank you to staying up. It is midnight near London where Marie is, so we'd like to really thank her for taking the time to be with us tonight. So Marie, why don't we start with you? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your group and what it is you do.
Well, I was working in professional career, and suddenly my daughter started having problems at school, and that, as it goes, things escalated. Poor parenting, lack of discipline. Then finally we diagnosed ADHD, and 4 years later autism. And I was given a list of different autism traits, and there were things like, does your daughter play Ninja Turtles? Does your daughter speak like a robot? And no, she didn't. So I really couldn't really make sense of this condition. And the only time when I started understanding what it is when I met a group of autistic parents who could explain it themselves by, in their own lived experience. So that's where I discovered the power of peer support amongst autistic people. Yeah. So, and a few years later, I was diagnosed myself at the age of 45, and it was well, it was a few years ago.
Yeah, well, it was a few years ago for me too. So
yeah. So it was this, everybody says it's an aha moment where everything falls into place because you start understanding. You have the key to explain what was happening. It gives a name to what was happening to you all your life, but also it gives the key for the future, how to approach it, how to address your challenges, and how to use your life in a positive way. And it was extremely empowering and liberating and self-affirming. So that was great.
Very nice. Yeah. Noor, Toni and I are both fans. I've been a member for a few years. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and the mission of the Autistic Self Advocacy Network?
Absolutely. Happy to. Hi, everyone. My name is Noor. I use he and him pronouns. I'm the community engagement manager over at the Autistic Self Advocacy Network. I am a late diagnosed autistic person myself. I am the first in my family, I think, to kind of claim disability as a thing, as like a title and a thing that applies to me. So a lot of new roadblocks, a lot of new challenges.
Mm-hmm.
So ASAN as an organization is a policy org by and for the autistic community, and as a part of the larger disability community and fighting for broader change on behalf of our communities as a whole. We put out resources covering everything from the federal budget all the way to COVID policy, and we put out action alerts and other for people to advocate for legislation on the state and federal level, as well as providing resources to help autistic folks with better understanding what resources we have available to us and what ways we have to kind of connect with community that already exists and how to build community where the framework and kind of the infrastructure might not exist quite yet.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, those alerts that you put out on the state level, I do work on legislative advocacy with my state's development. I'm having an autistic great talking moment tonight. My state's developmental disability council, I help them and work with them on legislative stuff. And I tell you what, your updates are very helpful.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that.
It saves me a lot of research.
If I can say what our organization does, Neurodiverse Self Advocacy is autistic led. So I'm the co-founder with a group of autistic people. We came together on an online forum and just realized that there are no services in UK for autistic people without severe intellectual disability who qualify for social care. So we decided to develop these services ourselves, and that's why the SA was formed. And we run an online forum, a community, an information website for self-advocacy, and we run mentoring programs. One is post-diagnostic support, well-being support program, where we use peer mentoring. All mentors are autistic. And the other one is mentoring into employment program, where we support people getting into careers they really want. Unlike the government-funded programs, they tend to, pigeonhole people immediately and push them into the first available job rather than into something that is actually sustainable for autistic people. Because the problem for us, I think, is not only getting a job, but also retaining the job, staying in the job for a long time, not having a burnout, not having to crash out due to unsuitable environment. So that's what we are trying to address with our mentoring programs. And the community's support we have is dramatic, is tremendous. It's really very invigorating to see how autistic people help each other.
Toni?
Yeah, I think that's so beautiful. And I mean, it's one of my big mantras all these years is the power of mentoring. There's nothing that can replace it. I really, for our listeners, I'd really like for us to dig in and start talking about what it means to be a self-advocate, because that is an abstract concept. And I think it's really important to make it like really concrete for people, because many of the folks that I work with don't even have, as they learn that they're on the spectrum, don't even know what it means to be a self-advocate, because as children, we are trained compliance. We're just supposed to fit in and do what we're supposed to do and stay under the radar. So advocacy really goes against what we've been kind of programmed to do. So can you guys speak to that? I'd like to hear from both of you on that. What does it mean to be a self-advocate?
Yeah, Noor, why don't we start with you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, goodness. There's a whole constellation of thoughts on this. The place that I usually like to start is kind of at the individual level and then kind of branching our way up. So at the individual level, self-advocacy can be complicated, but it can also be just as simple as knowing that you can say no and being willing and being capable to put yourself in a position to say, I don't feel comfortable doing something, or I don't want to do something. That's too much for me. I need a break. I need to be doing something different than what I'm doing right now. And at the individual level, even if it's just that one sentiment, that one word, or that one communication of that word. That is a critical foundation, because it's the exact thing you're touching on here, which is compliance being kind of the forced piece that you kind of just get regardless of what environment you've grown up in. Everyone kind of gets that sense that there's certain conventions, certain aspects that you're supposed to kind of hold about yourself. Don't talk too loud, don't talk too much, be polite. Polite only looks in a certain way. Look at people, no, you have to look at people in these specific ways. Like, there's not room really to work from the inside out. It all kind of comes from the outside in. So self-advocacy starts by working from the inside out. It starts with figuring out what you want and what you need, and making that information available and powerful and readily available to other people. And then that kind of, the transition kind of happens more where over time that'll shift from being individually starting with I want and I need different things to here's my goals. Here's where I want to go in the future. Here are the things I want to build. Here's the life I want to live. What needs to shift to make that happen? What resources do I need to make that happen? And over time, some people also shift to the community level. Now, for some folks, that looks kind of hyper local, and that's totally cool. And that might look like at your neighborhood level, talking about infrastructure, maybe offering sensory rooms that are higher or lower density on stimulation in terms of bright lights or bright sounds in a government office, for example. Or that might look like having more or less access to playgrounds, different times for a trash collection, different sensory environments in different places, opening up options, like at anything that is around you. But going to your town hall meetings, talking to your local officials, talking to your neighbors, organizing mutual aid groups, whatever that looks like. And for some people, they might take it a step further, go to the state level or tri-state level, and they might decide that the way things are structured right now doesn't make for lives that their communities or they themselves would feel comfortable living, or should be limited to have to live within. In the US, a good example of this is the funding around home and community-based services, which frankly, is, depending on what state you're in, either there will be longer or shorter wait lists for access to services that you might need as an autistic person, in terms of things like having, for example, an aid if you also have a physical disability, or access to additional help with supported decision making. Whatever things individual people need, sometimes people are waiting, and they decide they want to change things at that level. And by that same stretch, some people take that all the way to the national level. And some people go up and down and all between all of those, and that's all totally fine. But it all starts with that root thing of saying, this is something I need. This is something that I think I need and the people around me who have similar needs would need. And here's how I think we get there.
Yeah, Noor, it's interesting you mentioned the supported decision making. I actually spoke to about 100 parents last night. It was a program put on by the mid-sized school district for their graduating seniors, the autistic kids. And we talked about supported decision making as an alternative to guardianship. And a lot of the parents were very surprised at a lot of the stuff they found out that night. So,
yep, Marie, I can believe it.
Yeah, Marie,
I'm really glad that that information is being shared. Thank you so much for talking about that. That makes me really happy.
It's one of the things I talk about quite a bit. I really have a heart for transitioning teens and young adults, and then also for those like all of us that were diagnosed late in life that have to struggle through things, because the reality is once you turn 18, at least in the US, and Marie, you can tell us if it's in the UK, 18, boom, you're forgotten. And everybody 18 and over is pretty much, to me, they're the forgotten ones.
Yeah. I think, in many ways it's difficult to follow Noor because you stole my thunder, as it were. You so highlighted all the aspects so well. But I think the key step, I think, into well-being for every late diagnosed autistic person is to start realizing what does autism means to you, what it doesn't mean, and realizing, indeed, becoming aware of your needs in all various aspects, your sensory needs, your communication needs, what are your communication channels, what kind of, indeed, being able to set goals and progress and achieve your goals. This is in our mentoring program. Mentoring is a goal-oriented relationship, and it is extremely powerful in building self-esteem and sense of competence. I'm not broken, I can do things. Actually, I can achieve my goals. This is very empowering. So, the first step of self-advocacy, I think, is to becoming aware of one's needs and wants, and, what works, what doesn't, and developing these coping strategies that enable us to do what we want rather than trying to serve somebody else's needs. Coping strategies that help us to live better lives, to achieve better quality of life and well-being. I think this is absolutely critical. And being able to say no and to be assertive and talk to other people. Indeed, very powerful.
Yeah. Toni knows that, with me, I share so much of my personal life and what it really is to be autistic right now, because it helps people. People see that and go, wow, I'm not the only one. Other people deal with this.
Yeah. So I'm loving what you guys are saying, and I believe wholeheartedly that that's really a useful framework to look at. But I'm thinking back on my own life and a lot of the people that I work with, and how when I first started advocating for my own sensory needs, like even the first time I covered my ears, I was like a 40-year-old woman and it was noisy. And I was like, I'm tired of this. I'm going to cover my ears. I was terrified to do that because I had been in that compliance mode for so long. And I see that with a lot of the people I work with who are just terrified. And I don't use that word lightly. I mean, people are legitimately scared to say no, to speak up for themselves. So do you guys have some tips or strategies on how to begin that process of doing it? Because it's like we can cognitively, intellectually understand what it means to say no, but then actually making it happen can be very, very difficult.
Marie, you can steal Noor's thunder.
Well, I think what works for me and people we support is being in autistic-led spaces, being in the group with other autistic people. And, a moment happens where somebody says something and everybody else, yes, me too. I also have this experience. And people tap into each other lived experience and support each other. And people feel this belonging, they are normalized, and people start dropping the mask. Yeah, it's much easier to kind of to say yes, and in the autistic environment, and this helps to kind of take first steps, small steps towards removing removing the mask in public.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Noor?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I think autistic-led spaces are definitely a key part of kind of what we were touching on earlier about like mentoring, and the idea that when you see other people, you can kind of go, oh, okay, so they did that. They covered their ears, they left the room when it was too loud, they came back in, and they're telling me about it. So they're still alive, clearly, like nothing horrible happened. Well, as a direct result of that, we assume. But they're still here. Like there's this very tangible, direct moment of just like community and power in seeing other people and seeing yourself in them and thinking, if after a certain point of seeing people over and over again, self-advocating and doing those things, it kind of can normalize it in your head. And the thing I always tell people is kind of what I had to tell myself when I started kind of taking the initial steps to try and advocate for myself, which is that it's okay to feel awkward. It's okay to feel uncomfortable and to feel weird and to feel the weirdness of the moment. But like, by that same standard, any small step in the direction of what you want to change, in this case, wanting to be better or in that moment. So better in this case, meaning like not in pain from all of the various sensory things going on, right? If that looks like starting small being something more subtle, like putting in earplugs or putting in like the loop earbuds if you're like really concerned about aesthetics or want an excuse to write off to someone, like start with whatever you can manage, whatever you can push yourself to just do. And then once you've done that small step, it becomes something you can practice over and over. And then it gets easier to take the next slightly bigger step. And that just kind of progresses over time until eventually you're doing the thing that would have really freaked you out like 5 weeks ago. And that can feel really slow, but any build up to that self-advocacy is still self-advocacy. And once you've gotten there, you can keep practicing. There's also, I think, something to be said for the fact that like this is going to probably feel different depending on cultural factors as well. Because like for autistic people of color in particular, there's usually very frequently this added layer of like, kind of like, just based on my look at the numbers in the US and my experiences in community, like autistic people of color and particularly autistic women of color and autistic people who aren't men of color in general, like tend to get diagnosed later in life, and very frequently like there's higher levels of disability kind of stigma earlier in life, depending on various factors, but just kind of where you are in the US and what the messages are. So like, it's okay to come at this and to feel the shame that other people have placed with you, and understanding that that thing that you're holding on to, that shame, is something you're allowed to give back. And you're allowed to hold that and to ask yourself, where did I get this from? Where did I get this discomfort from? Who told me that I need to be uncomfortable with advocating for my needs? And can I give that gift back to them? Even if it just has to be a little at a time.
Yeah, it's so funny that you mentioned different people being hard to get diagnosed, because earlier in the week I was a guest on a podcast and I called Toni because we were going to talk specifically about women, being underdiagnosed, and I wanted to go over everything that I already knew and see if I forgot anything. And Toni gave me a very interesting fact about who that test was geared for.
Mm-hmm.
Toni?
Yeah, I mean, it was geared towards white males, white privileged males. And so women are not in that equation, and anybody of color is not in that equation. So anybody who's not a white male is not really normed for on that test. I love the idea of really taking baby steps, which is what both of you guys are saying. You don't have to start at the end. It's okay to start small with something you feel comfortable with, whether that's placing yourself in an environment that's accepting because other people are autistic and they're normalizing it, but also not feeling like you have to speak out to your boss all of a sudden. It could be just such a little thing of wearing earplugs, that's self-advocacy. And I think it's really important for us to recognize that those little steps are important and they're valid, and that those lead to more and more self-advocacy. And I think the other thing that's standing out to me is that it's okay to make like if other people are angry at you setting your limits, which sometimes people do get annoyed if you say, no, I can't do that, it doesn't work for me, or people may get annoyed, and that's theirs. You have to really be clear on what is right for you. And if somebody gets upset with that or wants to pressure you into doing something that isn't right for you, that's their problem.
It's about becoming
Yep.
assertive.
I receive.
And the best thing I once in my old corporate life, I attended training, and other people didn't find particularly useful, but for me it was heaven, because it kind of debugged and provided a formula for communication, and it was saying that what is being assertive? Being assertive, it's like bargaining. So if you have a legitimate need, you have the right to state your need and highlight positive of meeting that need and negative of not meeting that need. And that is what being assertive is. And it's still right now, it's with me. Every time I'm worried about, asking for more or asking for something, I'm just, remember, you have a legitimate need.
Mm-hmm.
It's really helpful to conceptualize it this way. That being assertive is about recognizing that you have a legitimate need and communicate it to others, and it changes completely, because you don't need to give reasons. It's legitimate. It's your need.
Yeah, that's really important. And it's your need. So your need doesn't have to be like everybody else's. If it's right for you and it's your need, that's all that matters. I think a lot of times, a lot of the people I work with do a lot of comparing themselves. Like, well, I shouldn't want or need this because nobody else that I know does. Well, that doesn't matter. If you need it, then you need it. And I think it's okay to identify what your need is and not feel like you have to compare what you need and what's important to everybody else.
Yeah. Well, what I always do when people ask me, if I want to do something that I know is just going to, completely freak me out and start towards a meltdown, I just kind of laugh and go, yeah, that's not happening. No way.
Yeah.
Yep.
Go ahead, Noor.
Yeah, people can comparison games all they want. They can sit there and say, my aunt's cousin's kid who is autistic wouldn't have that sensory need. And it's like, great, good for your cousin's aunt's autistic kid. I'm going to talk about me right now because I know me, and I need to not be doing whatever it is you're trying to be doing. This is my boundary. Do not cross it.
Well, that right there is Dr. Stephen Shore. If you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. We all have a lot of traits that overlap, or some traits that overlap, but each of us is unique as a fingerprint or a snowflake.
Different.
We don't have the same sensory needs, emotional needs, physical needs.
And also our need change depending on the context, the situation, and over time. So it's important to keep becoming aware of your changing needs as well.
Good point. Yeah. That's a really good point. Yeah, and these change over the lifetime. Like as we age, our needs become different, and they're just as legitimate at whatever stage you're in. I am wondering, like, I loved hearing about, earplugs as a great form of self-advocacy. I think it would be really helpful for people to maybe get some different examples of different ways that they could start to self-advocate for themselves, both in like relationships and in the workforce. I know, Maria, you do a lot of, stuff in terms of sustainable employment. So I'd love to hear what both you guys have to say about, some kinds of specific ways that a person could advocate for themselves.
Noor, go ahead. Noor, do you want to go ahead and start? Okay, Maria, you want to go?
Okay. Well, one of the things I could speak about employment. And the thing about employment is
This is going to be highly.
Here, Nora, hang on just 1 sec. We're going to let Maria finish, and then we'll go to you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, right. Nora, hang on just 1 sec. Let Maria finish, and then we'll come back to you.
I think he froze for a minute. So
yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Marie.
We, in our mentoring program, we provide people with resources and we coach them in how to disclose their disability, their condition, in a way that's most positive, that promotes positive understanding and is empowering, and also how to ask for what we call reasonable adjustments. In US, it's called accommodations, and to identify what accommodations people need. We also have a great organization here that provides government grant for people with disabilities for these accommodations, which are too expensive for the employer to pay for. So we coach our mentees how to apply to this organization called Access to Work, and how to advocate what kind of accommodations are available generally, what they are helpful for, and explore their needs and specific the strengths they have and the needs they have to identify suitable accommodations that would be effective. So it's because it is important to do it in the right way, as it were, to promote a positive message.
Yeah, and Marie, the right way is different for each person, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's all about asserting your strengths, what you are good at, and why your autism makes you perfect for this job. That's what makes you better at your job. But you can do your job even better with this accommodation. And they are reasonable because they are practical and they would increase your productivity and whatever.
Well, and the accommodations an average autistic person needs are fairly inexpensive too, correct?
Absolutely, they are peanuts compared to some other things. Sometimes this organization Access to Work install lifts for disabled people who are wheelchair users. So compared to this, autistic accommodations are really peanuts, and they are very effective, such as coaching sessions on strategies to be productive, to cope with executive functioning in the workplace. Co-coaching with the manager to understand, to help them to understand the autistic person and how to interact productively, how to manage autistic person in a constructive way, and training for work colleagues in understanding autism. The right kind of training that promotes strengths and inclusion, as opposed to highlights deficits.
Yeah. Nora, welcome back. Nora, can you hear me?
No worries. Are y'all able to hear me?
Yeah, we're good.
Yes, I can.
So
okay,
go ahead and talk about relationships and outside of work.
I was going to say, yeah, absolutely. So I would say at a relationship level, one of the key things is just kind of having practice and being able. Oh dear, are people freezing again?
No.
I can hear you.
We can hear you. So are you talking about romantic relationships? Are you talking about relationships of all kinds?
I think we lost him again.
He's freezing again.
Having kind of set. Okay. I was okay. Are we good?
Go ahead, Noor. You're okay.
Okay. Basically, boundaries and being able to practice with boundaries is a useful skill that kind of crosses all three categories. I would say that can be as small as kind of having firm work hours or firm boundaries on, say, how much time you want to spend with a person, or having, say, a cutoff time after which you wouldn't accept changes to, say, where you're having lunch with a friend or a partner. Like basically just having practice with setting a boundary where it's things that feel less kind of severe, things where it feels less risky, and then kind of opening things up to like setting boundaries where it feels a little bit more challenging would better represent your needs in a given situation.
Yeah, it's like somebody asking, would you like to change where we're going to lunch and go here instead? It's like, well, would I like to, or will I? Because there's kind of a difference in there.
Yep.
Those are important because a lot of times the boundaries that we need to have as people on the spectrum are not ones that make intuitive sense to a non-autistic person. Like a lot of people out there can just go and make a change or can be in fluorescent lights and not have any trouble with that. And so it's hard for them to maybe wrap their brain around like why that would even be an issue to change, the lunch venue. And yet for us, it was hard enough just to get set on going to lunch in the first place, maybe. So really having that communication, I think, with people about, what those boundaries are is really important.
And with ourselves, because, we can overthink so much. And I will admit to sitting one time, or maybe more, in the driveway in my town of 4,000 people with 4 fast food places and sitting for 15, 20 minutes trying to decide which one I was going to.
Yeah.
Because we overthink things so much.
That's familiar.
Yep.
Yeah. One of the area of self-advocacy that we often see in our mentoring programs is self-advocating with family members in terms of, you don't look autistic. Don't worry, you are fine. Why do you need that? You are fine. Yes, we are fine, but we need this acknowledgement. We need this recognition and acceptance from the family members because it helps our understanding of ourselves. We all wish that the family members would fully embrace and understand and accept our new identity.
Yeah. Well, Marie, it's funny because Toni and I have had this conversation before. I have a neighbor who, when I moved here 5 years ago, was about 60. And she told me that I didn't look autistic. And this woman is college educated, is from Kansas City, which is a major city in the United States, worked in an industry where she, had to be fairly sharp. And she described a person with Down syndrome to me and thought that was autistic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that brings us to like a larger picture and something that Noor mentioned towards the beginning, and that is we can advocate for ourselves in these little like personal realms. But when we do that, there's a larger kind of implication, and that is really getting people educated and understanding that people are wired differently, and to just not make those assumptions that we're all the same. That builds its way up to that hierarchy of our societal structure, and really can make it easier for other people who are needing advocacy as well. So when you self-advocate, I think we are advocating in a larger realm for advocacy for all of us.
Well, right, because when you're talking about advocating for, say, sensory hours in a shopping mall, you're not the only person that's going to that shopping mall. So in a sense, you still are advocating for the community at large.
Absolutely. I think just having the conversation, broadening the conversation, this normalizes acceptance. It normalizes talk about autism. It is normal to be autistic. It's normal part of human diversity. You would have autistic people, autistic customers, autistic clients, autistic employees. So the more we talk about it in a positive way, the more, the sooner the paradigm shift will happen. I've been at a business lunch promoting our social enterprise, and it was amazing. I had time to speak to 3 people. 2 of them had autism in their family, and the third person had a colleague. And today I was at another radio station, and the guy had autistic family members in his family. So, it's really amazing. I've spoken to 4 people in the last 2 days, and they're all personally touched by autism. So it's not rare. We are not out there, a different world.
Yeah.
We are firmly part of this world, and, it's part of everybody's experience. Everybody knows someone.
Right. Well, the CDC says what, like 1 in 43, 1 in 45, but that's just the people who have been diagnosed. That's not just, as we talked about, the women, the people of color, any different group that has not been diagnosed. I firmly believe that number is definitely down in the 30s somewhere.
Yeah. I think I've seen some statistic in US, in the state of New Jersey, it's 1 in 30. So that's about 3%.
Yeah.
So, because it would depend on how accessible the diagnosis is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Noor, can you talk about that, about the accessibility of diagnosis and, what it's like in the United States as far as anything that you guys have as far as numbers or?
I think you might be frozen again.
Oh, okay. Well, Toni, do you have any information on that really?
I mean, I hesitate to say anything because I think the numbers that we have, as Marie said, I don't think they're accurate. I will say that in my professional experience, I believe that there's many, even though the statistics do not show this, there are as many women or girls on the spectrum as there are males. That's just my own personal professional experience, having done this for over 30 years. But yeah, I think that we are just another part of the neurodiversity of community, and that's a really great way, I think, to look at it. We're not out there like Marie.
No, and as a friend of ours who's another self-advocate, Toni and I both know Lara Coleman's, who said sex causes autism. We're born that way, we're going to die that way. Which is totally true. So, Noor, are you back with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep. Okay. So, can you talk about at all, autism in the United States and what we're finding out as far as, numbers or maybe different parts of the country or, things such as that?
Absolutely. So I don't have breakdowns by individual state, just there's a lot of data and not all of it is standardized, because why would it be? We would love things to actually be organized. But what I can say is that Toni's hunch from earlier is, in fact, generally speaking, correct from what we've seen. The diagnostic disparity trends towards excluding women, people of color, trans and non-binary people more broadly, and just kind of everyone under the sun who's not a young cisgender white. So that has been the case for a long time. What we do know is that the diagnostic numbers rising over the past couple of decades is actually for good reasons, namely that more people are getting diagnosed and access to diagnosis is becoming slightly more common than it was even, say, 5 years ago than it is now. And a lot of that is due to a variety of healthcare factors, many of which are individual reforms, but that essentially amount to more people are insured, more people have access to healthcare than did even a decade ago. So there's not some mystery crimson tide of autism coming to just lift us all into the neurodiversity pool, but rather it's just kind of people who have always been there are getting recognized more. But by that same standard, that doesn't mean that we've actually like states that document this more in detail. Basically,
keep going.
Okay. Basically saying that, like, apologize, I'm hearing like a slight echo, but yes, basically saying that for autistic people who receive kind of an inkling that they need to pursue a diagnosis for reasons like, say, accommodations in school or accommodations at work, very frequently the barriers that are still really common are that there might be, say, one or two practitioners in a given area. And if those one or two practitioners aren't trained in how to recognize autism in anyone that's not a young cis white dude, we're going to run into the problem where even if you manage to get to that one provider, and even if he takes your insurance, and even if you can afford the copay, and even if you can get there and back, frankly, because not everything's accessible, not everywhere has public transit, not everyone can afford a car. Once you get in the door, they might not know how to recognize you. They might not know how to tell what autism looks like on you and what you've come through and what your societal fact like. It's also worth noting too that, like, I haven't seen the data on this, but there's definitely been a lot of reports individually and like case studies that have talked about language and culture being a major factor, particularly across different racial identity groups, because the way that, say, someone who's coming from a completely other country, like, say, Pakistan or Afghanistan, like some of my family, is going to have a very different approach to the way our face is going to be read when looking at someone during a conversation than, say, I would as someone who's a child of immigrants from those places, but lives in America and has been raised in America with American cultural norms. So while it might be, for example, really standard for me to have a weird way of making eye contact and that to be seen as abnormal, my dad will look dead on directly at anyone who he's talking to, not because he actually is looking them in the eye, but because, like, the cultural practice, at least in the places where he grew up, is that when someone's talking, you look directly behind them so they know you're pointed at them, but also you're not confronting them by looking them directly in the eyes. So, like,
yeah,
nuance and cultural differences, they play a big role.
Yeah.
Wasn't it you that I had the conversation with earlier in the week about the cultures, where they don't look people in the eye?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. In some cultures, it's perceived to be rude. It's not, and in certain certain positions, in certain social standing, it's rude and inappropriate to see a person in much higher status in the eye, and also you're supposed to be respectful and quiet and nodding yes, and not talk too much unless spoken to. So that's why autistic women are hiding in plain sight in every society. I also believe that there are as many autistic women as men. It's a matter of recognition.
Correct. Yeah.
Diagnostic criteria.
Well, I think really what it is respect. It's a lot of those countries, be they Asian, be they Middle Eastern, be they some European, where respect is very, very important. And that's what a lot of the not looking in the eye is. It's a form of respect.
I would argue that as autistic people, we too have our own culture and we have our own rules about how we choose to function together. And our rules are different than the mainstream culture. If you want to, pace in a room with a bunch of autistic people or flap your hands or sit away and do parallel play at any age, you don't want to actively verbally engage in the conversation. You don't want to make eye contact. You want to monologue about your special interests. These are all socially acceptable things amongst us as a culture. And so just to get back to that point about having the mentoring and the fact that, Noor, I 100% support what Noor said about, that diagnostic challenge of, even if you can get it, you're not guaranteed to get a good evaluation. if you don't get access to one of those people who's highly, highly trained. So it's important, I think, in terms of self-advocacy, that if you suspect, if you identify as part of the autistic culture, then and that diagnosis is not available for you or doesn't feel accessible for you, being a part of that peer group is really so important, because you don't have to have a diagnosis to be welcome amongst us. That's, for the most part, we recognize how hard that is to get. So if you identify as being autistic or having autistic traits and characteristics, the best thing you can do is spend your time with other people who identify that way as well and get support that way.
Yeah, and Toni, I wrote a piece a few weeks ago called Welcome to Club 299, which 299 is the diagnostic code for autism spectrum disorder, the DSM. And that was what I said. You know what? If you've done the research, if you believe that you're autistic, come on in.
Yes.
All are welcome.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We welcome in our programs, we welcome people who self-identified and those who are undergoing diagnosis. And because here in UK, waiting times are horrendous. Some people wait for 2 years to see the professionals. So they're welcome on the journey as soon as they start exploring whether they're autistic.
Wow. Hey, Marie, we've got just a few minutes left. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about your group and about how people can get involved with it?
Well, we have a website. It is, if you Google ndsa.uk, you'll get our forum online community, and also our mentoring programs. You can find our mentoring programs on ndsa.uk/tool-up. So this is a website where we talk about our mentoring program and how to get involved. We are a completely online organization. We don't have a physical office, and we welcome people from all over the world. So do get in touch, and we'll see how we can support you.
Sounds good. Noor, same thing about you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how people can get involved with the with ASAN and what you can do to help them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say the two things that are always going to be out there and available on our website. We have a newsletter that goes out to everyone via email, as well as it gets cross-posted to our website and our social media. That'll usually tell you what we've done in the past month, as well as give you an idea of what action alerts we've got going right now. We do also cross-post our action alerts to autisticadvocacy.org/action. So those are always available there. And those are usually going to focus on legislative priorities that we welcome people to get involved in, and usually provide scripts and tips on how to contact relevant people in relevant offices about it. I would also say the other thing that we always have open is we have a proxy calling system where, for our action alerts, if someone wants to participate, but for whatever disability related reason does not feel comfortable speaking to someone on the phone, our proxy calling system allows people to submit a script with what they would like to say, along with basic personal info like your name and email address and what elected official you want to communicate with. And then it gets sent to a volunteer. Volunteer reads it out to that person and then sends the results confirming that it has been sent back to the original person who submitted the script. So for that, our volunteers are people who can talk on the phone, which very polarizing subject in the autistic community, and that's completely valid and okay. But the idea is for the autistics that like the phone, it's there for you as a volunteering option. And for people who are not super phone friendly, that's also completely cool. That's why we got the option. It's also why we are starting to add email scripts as an option in many of our action alerts where it is physically possible. So that's an ongoing thing. And one more way people can get involved, IAC, which is I hope I get the acronym right, the Interagency Coordinating Committee for Autism in the U.S. Influences how research funding gets placed for autistic research at the federal level. So they have regular meetings a couple of times a year, and they open up for public comments shortly beforehand. So whenever that happens, we put out an action alert and we put out notifications on social media so that people know they can go and comment about what they think IAC should be looking at, because we want them to have feedback from the autistic community. So if that is something you're interested in, we always have, if the comment period is open, a link on our social media as well as on our website.
I have participated in that many a time. It's awesome.
I'm really excited to hear about the phone advocacy. It's so much fear for so many of us around doing using the phone. And so I'm really excited to hear that that's an option for people who are averse to using the phone. It's great.
Well, absolutely. It's really exciting. And I am thrilled that the allies we have that are more phone people than I am have an outlet they can channel that phone skill into.
No kidding.
Absolutely. Well, Toni, do you have anything before we get out of here? Any of your seminars or groups or your
right now, just to give like a little update on the group. So I am 2/3 the way through my addiction education and support group for folks on the spectrum. That's been really important and special, to address that challenge for people on the spectrum. And we've got, the women in my craft, shop that they have built. They're getting lots of requests to go out and do, in-person sales. So they're doing really good with that little, business venture that they have going on. And we're really taking, the social groups that I have right now, we're really taking them to that point where it's beyond just self-advocacy for them, but like they're out there in the community now really being leaders and really changing the narrative from help us to we are here as a valid and unique part of the community, and we have a lot to offer you. And so it's really beautiful to see that where the community is looking at these guys in terms of, okay, what do they bring to the table to enrich the community as a whole? And that warms my heart so much to see the groups doing that. So.
Yeah, and I think one last reminder before we go is, the four of us all know it because we're self-advocates who are working in the field every day, but it's not just April, Autism Awareness Month or Acceptance Month, depending on how you look at it. This is a year-round deal. So please don't just think about it during April. Think about it all 12 months.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, Noor, thank you very much. Marie, thank you so much. It's almost 1 a.m. in the UK where you are. I just want to say one thing. Go Manchester United. That's my English Premier League all soccer team. So I know she's in London, so she's not a big fan of Man City. So
okay. Oh, I'm ashamed. I don't have my favorite. The only team I know is Red Sox because I spent 3 months in Boston.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, again,
baseball. I know.
Thank you both very much. Toni, you and I will be back next month for another one of these, and let's keep autism going all year round. And one last thing.
Leave a like and subscribe.
That's right. All right. Good night.
Good night. Thank you so much for joining.